I'm William Shatner. I've done a lot of things in my career, but this takes the cake. This is so cool. You, Joseph, today, it's all about you. You won the internet. Congratulations. It's exciting. It makes me want to celebrate. Makes me want to get up out of this chair. Makes me want to sing. Makes me want to dance. Makes me want to shout. Kick my heels up. Throw my hands up. Toss my head back. No, really, people should be shouting your name in the street.
Come on now. Sing
that song.
Joseph,
Sing it out loud.
Joseph.
I want to celebrate. Put it up in lights.
The internet belongs to you.
See, no one else deserves to be celebrated like you because you are the best.
Joseph Jaffe is not famous. Me, Tom Arnold, I am very famous. I absolutely like, because it's very true. Like, I hadn't freaking heard of you until I was sitting on a Friday night. This is how bad my life is. Listen, fucker, good luck. Good luck with your rebranding. Like anybody knew what the name was before. What was the name? Okay, who gives a shit? That's a good name because it's got your name in it. You can pretend you're humble. You say, I'm not famous. And, which you aren't. So you're just, I mean, anyway, but I hope you get famous doing this. Good luck to you.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! Out here in the stream, as in the streaming era, I fight for my dreams. I get my heart into my living.
You encourage drinking or marijuana use on the show?
I don't need a fight, cause Evelyn's right. Or you could sponsor an emu. I'm Batman.
That's your tweetable moment, folks. That's your tweetable moment. If Mark Zuckerberg makes a metaverse, is that Web3? No, it's Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse.
He's like us. He's flawed.
Just a little segue.
That's some dope shit, dude. That's really, really nice.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! Hooty-hoo to you. How are you? It doesn't matter what day it is, because in the world of the internet, which apparently I won, according to William Shatner, it's all about on demand, when you watch it, how you watch it, when you watch it, on your terms. If you're watching live, you can comment live and we'll put your comments on the screen live. There are benefits to live. I think the streaming era is very different to the way that television works today with respect to watching it after the fact, little clips on YouTube, breaking it down into bite-sized nuggets because, well, we don't have attention. Yeah, we don't have attention, but that doesn't mean that we should be not given attention or treated like the intelligent organisms that we are. But enough about rants. Let's focus. You want to have a blinder today? Do you know what it means to have a blinder? If you have a blinder, it means you are a goat, not a poet, a goat. You can be a goat. If you're Marc Blinder, you will play a blinder, and he is my guest today. He is a colorful, I am colorful too. I'm Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Look at the background behind me. I'm colorful, and Marc is colorful, not only in terms of his hair, but in terms of his commentary and his perspective on how we're going to clean up Times Square and move forward. And I cannot wait for him to come on the show today. If you like what you see, if you like what you hear, if you like me, and even if you don't like me and you just want to see what the hell I'm up to next, subscribe to the show, bit.ly/subscribe to the show. You know, it's actually something that I haven't done. It's something that, when you are in the trenches, when you are a creator, when you are a builder, sometimes you forget about the building blocks. Sometimes you forget about the blocking and tackling. And one of the most important things to be able to do is tell people how they can find you, tell them how they can get hold of you. And one of the most important things is, in my case, the only golden metric for me is people that subscribe to the show. That's how you build some kind of audience that hopefully comes back for more, that is sticky, that is, flipping the funnel. Someone once wrote a book called Flip the Funnel. I wonder who. But that's how you use existing customers to gain new ones. So if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, please go ahead and subscribe to me. Click on me. No, actually click on the other side. And I really do appreciate it. Many of you know that every single morning, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m., we do virtual coffee in the Discord server in discord.gg/Alpha Collective. Alpha Collective being my premium community, my professional organization, a Web3 business focused on the business of Web3. But the coffee, my friends, the coffee is free and always will be. It's an opportunity to manifest on Monday, Thought Leadership Tuesday, Wellness Wednesday. On Thursday, we actually have after shows. So hopefully Marc will come back one morning and hang out with us, and we will talk about the show. It will be the show about the show on the show after the show. If you know, you know. It's all just rhyming, isn't it? And then on Friday, we have No Agenda Friday, where we have no agenda, for God's sake, absolutely none. And if you don't like it, and if you're not a morning person, you can actually subscribe as well. bit.ly/collective cafe to go. Take it with you. Today, in fact, this morning, which of course could be a different morning, depending on when you're watching this, we spoke about, was it Hanlon's law, which is basically kind of something like the law of stupidity, etc. We spoke about cheat codes. We spoke about a concept called verbal innovation, not verbal diarrhea, but verbal innovation. I just made it up on the spot. What is verbal innovation? Verbal innovation is when you actually talk it out, when you talk out loud, when you are brainstorming out loud by verbalizing it. It's the same thing like when you're working on a presentation. You must vocalize, you must verbalize. And when you do that, is how one idea will lead to another, which will lead to another. Don't hold your cards close to your chest. Share it with the world. Verbalize, vocalize. You will be surprised what comes out of it. But now it is time for our seated soliloquy. And today, the seated soliloquy, connected, of course, to my guest, is called Identity. I have to tell you, and I've been discussing this with many people lately, that we're living in crazy, scary times. We're living in a world now where AI is becoming smarter and smarter by the day, by the prompt. We're living in a time where machines and artificial intelligence becomes sentient. We're moving towards the singularity. If you don't know what any of that means, that's okay, because I'm not sure I do either. But I'll tell you one thing is, I'm not really sure what is real and what is not real anymore. Am I real? Am I a bot? Am I an apparition? Am I a hallucinogenic? Am I a hologram? Am I a deep fake? Elon Musk, the gentleman from China who looks like Elon Musk, I had him on my show. And people were saying, well, I don't believe that he is who he is. He's a deep fake. I said, no, I saw him. I was with him. We were talking. He was on his phone. We were working on the translation. How can you tell me that he wasn't real? But when you don't know what to trust and who to trust, when you don't know that a tweet has come from ChatGPT, when you actually are looking at video and you don't even know that the person that you see is real, what do you do? Even audio, what do you do? Well, and where do you go? And the answer, I believe, is going to be blockchain. And the answer, I believe, is going to be Web3. And we're going to hear from Marc, and I think he's doing some interesting things there as well. So that identity cannot be copied or corrupted or duplicated or cloned. It is immutable, it is verified, and it is validated on the blockchain. We need to trust. Now, there are many other ways that we can do it. I believe that we will see a return to IRL where we can actually prod and poke people and realize that, in fact, they're real. That's one way for sure. but there are other ways as well. And live is that. This is live right now. If I make a mistake, then I'm going to make a mistake. If the dog barks, the dog is going to bark. That's another way that we can create cheat codes that in fact are not cheating, if you follow what I'm saying, live and or IRL and or verified by the blockchain. That is how we maybe work with the machines and even beat them. But more importantly, that's how we beat the scammers. That's how we clean up Times Square, and that's how we win via the blockchain. And now it's time to win by bringing on Marc Blinder. I didn't even ask him if it's Blinder or Blinder, but I'm going with Blinder because it sounds more impressive. As I've been doing over the last several episodes, I decided to go into ChatGPT and ask the machine to create a 100-word introduction to Marc Blinder, co-founder and CEO of Icon, or is it Acon? Aicon? I don't know. Again, maybe I should have asked GPT to help me with that. But what I have been doing lately is having a little bit of fun. And so I asked GPT to come up with this 100-word introduction, but also to be as colorful as possible to really tap into Marc's hair. And this was the introduction. Marc Blinder, the co-founder and CEO of Icon, is a true visionary in the world of business. With a kaleidoscope of experience in technology and entrepreneurship, Marc brings a dynamic and colorful approach to his work. His ability to paint a vivid picture of the future of blockchain technology is simply stunning. With his keen eye for detail and his passion for innovation, Marc is a master at weaving together a tapestry of success. Whether he's charting a course for his company or collaborating with others in the industry, Marc's rainbow of skills and expertise is truly a sight to behold. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think about the introduction? You want it? It's yours. It's free.
That intro was awesome. It's a lot to live up to. And I've got to say, your instincts were right. I'm Marc Blinder from Icon. So perfect. Thank you.
And then suddenly, and you see, and suddenly I start second guessing myself, thinking, is it Acon? Is it like, but I went with Icon because you are an icon. You're a blinder, you're having a blinder, and you are an ICON. You're an icon. How about that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, and the name Icon is from the ancient Greek for a mirror-like reflection, because we were trying to reflect reality onto the blockchain. So it's
and I have to believe that I have to believe there's only one of you. I mean, anyone walking around with that beautiful pink hair, that dares to impersonate you, they deserve to be taken down.
I've seen the occasional bird with this hairdo, but
the occasional bird. Well, listen, as long as blockchain is not for the birds, that's going to be okay. Now, before we get into the blockchain, speaking of which, we have a little fun segment here on the show that we call Fun Facts, because they're facts and some of them are fun. And we attempt to figure out the deep, dark, sordid secrets of our guests. And so we went into the archives and we found out that you once spoke at NATO. So tell us a little bit about that experience and how you, I don't know, did you get to hang out with any of these stiffs?
I didn't hang out with any of those stiffs, but it was quite the experience. I mean, just going into the building, taking all your devices, quite high security facility. That was pretty interesting as a social media expert, which I was at the time. And I was actually there to talk about misinformation and disinformation on Twitter, like the future of bot propaganda wars. So it turned out to be truer than I had even feared at the time. So I'm really glad I did it, but it was a unique experience, and a little scary, because one of the things you do realize when you meet with the folks from NATO, right, the allies, which I consider myself part of a NATO ally, if you will, we have no real propaganda budget, so to speak. And so all these ideas we were bringing to the table about, like, here's how you could combat this misinformation. There's a room full of people listening. of all sorts of military ranks, professors, experts from NATO, strategists, all this stuff, but there's no real budget to fight back. So they had sort of, at least at that time, very limited options where they could just do these very straightforward, oh, ISIS tweets this thing and we tweet an image disproving their claim. We tweet a video disproving this claim, but we didn't really have the same things on our side that some of the other folks out there do, as we've seen since then.
It's interesting. I mean, in a very almost frivolous level, I think of like this concept of a propaganda budget. Do you have a propaganda budget? But even if we kind of unpack that a little bit and bring it into business terms, we certainly talk about earned media. You're an expert in social media. I'm someone who's been in social media for a fair amount of time. I wrote Join the Conversation back in 2007. And we always spoke about this idea of, expect the unexpected and prepare for the worst, prepare for the best, this idea of really understanding earned media. But when we think about maybe a different way of thinking of a propaganda budget, it's almost this idea of not a war room, but how do you fight back? How do you talk back? How do you defend yourself? How do you defend your honor? How do you join the conversation, especially if that conversation is one in which perhaps there are some untruths or mistruths? And specifically, Marc, there is almost this idea that sometimes we have this, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. If we step in, if we defend ourselves, then suddenly we're defensive. So how do you find that authentic middle ground to be able to set the record straight without being seen as someone who is, guilty by not association, but by defensiveness?
Yeah, well, and this is something that I think is a very difficult and ever-changing target, right? Because certainly in the time when I was growing up, that refereeing was done mostly by what you might call the traditional media. And in the era of social media, those kind of referees are sort of taken out of the picture. And so we're used to say, oh, well, if this person is being quoted in the newspaper or publishing an op-ed, maybe they know something, right? Now everyone has their own ability to reach people directly. And so I think a lot of credibility has to be earned, using the term you say, it has to be earned by how you engage with people in reality over time. And that's why, I jump at the opportunity to come on shows like this, mostly to talk about blockchain and Web3 and stuff like that. But I'll talk about anything to try and set the record straight where I can, where maybe not everyone has the same technical knowledge that I do from having been in the tech industry for a long time.
I always love it when I'm able to come up with my guest's next book. And your next book, by the way, everybody look out for Marc Blinder's next book, wherever books are sold or used to be sold. Maybe you'll even mint it on the blockchain. But your book will be called Earned Credibility. I love that concept. That's a phrase that's got a lot of, by the way, I've just realized my magenta banners are the same color as your hair. Or pink, which is
and the art.
Yeah, exactly. But earned credibility, like trust, you don't command it, you don't demand it, you have to earn it. And I think that is something that hopefully a lot of people watching can just get them to maybe think about slightly differently. How are you earning your credibility?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So what else did we find out about you when you're not hanging out with NATO? We found out that you are into building alliances. And I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I was looking at this and I was thinking, wait, you founded the Gay Straight Alliance in your high school. And I was thinking, what is the Gay Straight Alliance? Or is it, and how is it, sounds very much like Monty Python. And how is it different to the Straight Gay Alliance, the Judean People's Front? Fuck off, we're the People's Front of Judea. Anyway, so tell us about this alliance.
Well, yeah, because this kind of nomenclature is really out of date. I'm a child of the 90s, for those who don't know. And so I in high school, was one of the founders of an organization which, at that time, it was basically what you might call a group for like LGBTQ plus rights in my high school, because the high school I had moved to, when I moved from New Jersey to Massachusetts, the new high school was quite a bit more homophobic than the old high school I had just come from, which was still, I mean, the 90s still pretty homophobic, but this was like really a step up. Like really Dover, Massachusetts was hitting it out of the park on homophobia. And so it was something I always grew up with, like trying to do what is right and trying to make a difference where I can. And so that was something that it was just so striking to me, having moved there halfway through high school. And I thought, let's get a group of kids together and see what we can do.
So the gay straight versus the straight gay alliance, these were straight people or gay people?
A mix of all of the above.
Yeah. And
yeah.
so,
and so the whole idea was just, this is people allied for equal rights, right? And so that might be, regardless of your background, you believe that we should treat people decently with true humanity, regardless of their sexual orientation.
I would love more gay people out there to think fairly about us straight people, because I think we've got a. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I know.
But I think
it's been a tough 5,000 years, hasn't it?
It's been a tough. Let me tell you, the amount of discrimination over the last 5,000 years about us straight people. I mean, when you put it that way, it actually. It makes the reverse argument so beautifully and perfectly, right? When you actually think about even, and I've done it as well. Like I have no problem, being self-deprecating as a white male, as a straight white male, being able to say, "Oh, woe is us." We'll work harder, and just remember, you have 5,000 years of history, on your side. So,
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I think with everything, there's this sort of spectrum of truth that is in there, but obviously there's this bigger weight on one side than the other, right? I'm sure there are moments places and moments where people are being discriminated against for being gay or lesbian, and there's other places and moments where they're being discriminated against for being straight, but the one is way more common than the other, right?
What about being discriminated against for being in Web3? See how I just segued into into the topic at hand. It was like, here comes the digital. It used to be me when I was in the agency world. Here comes the digital guy is going to say, la, 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 everyone's going to be buying stuff online, even clothing, even food online. You actually saw this article of mine where I spoke about my experience with and through creator coins, and I spoke about how I believe in the tokenization of everything, but like all cases, often it comes down to timing and a bit of luck. And my argument was, I'm sick and tired of everyone referring to Web3 and blockchain as the Wild West. It's actually more like the gold rush within the Wild West. But that's like being able to think about everyone living in this time as corrupt, as a bandit, as an opportunist, when there were more honest people with integrity than there were dishonest bandits trying to make or snake oil salesmen. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about this idea. You talk about doing the right thing, and creating an environment where people are not discriminating against, whether it's the degens or the normies. So take it away and kind of set the scene, if you will.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, because there is a lot of discrimination against Web3 people and Web3 projects, but partially that is based on a lot of scandal that has preceded it, right? And I think we're in a moment of time right now where it's critical that we set a much higher ethical bar for the Web3 industry than we've had in the past. Actually, just speaking of this, like discrimination and race, as we were talking about earlier, I remember reading in the news that, one of the things Barack Obama, when he became president, really emphasized with the staff is the administration had to be scandal-free because he was America's first Black president, right? So there's this, like, because of the prejudice, we have to be twice as good. And I think we are 3 steps back from there, because because the prejudice we needed to be twice as good. Instead, we have like the Sam Bankman-Frieds of the world making us all look like complete assholes. And then, oh, and sorry, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
I already have sworn.
Oh, good. Great.
As did Tom Arnold. By the way, we do have a self-imposed bleeper here. So if I say shut the up, but I can only do it for myself. So yes, you are allowed to swear.
All right, thank you. But yeah, so you have people like that, right? Do Kwon, who was just arrested, the founder of Terra, right, and Luna. That project stole billions of dollars, right? Maybe indirectly, he didn't come into anyone's house and like rob them, but he robbed them, right? And so you have this issue in our industry where you have the SBFs, the Do Kwons, you have the Celsius, you have all these high-profile failures where people have gotten absolutely robbed. And I think the mass media has painted all of blockchain and all of Web3 and all of crypto with the same brush. And you never hear the good stories, right? You only hear about the corruption. And so to fight that perception, I think the industry needs to work literally twice as hard on ethics and transparency than we had to before.
What I really love about what you've said, and if I take myself back to the beginning of digital, I remember how frustrated I was that the bar was always higher for us, that we were being held to a higher standard. When we looked at the 30-second spot, that was television was getting all the ad dollars, and it was based on people filling out diaries and reporting the next day what they think they might have watched, when the reality is they were probably making a sandwich or going to the toilet during the commercials. And the reality, again, is that the reach that people talk about with television is really just potential. It is the potential to have put your ad in front of their eyeballs if they were even paying attention. And I would get frustrated at with click-through rate, etc., how much accountability we had to bring to the table. It seemed like a double standard. And I really love your point, which is, no, we have to work harder. It's the same thing like being a white man. You've got to work harder. You've got to work harder if you want to compete and if you want to be able to level the playing fields. And rather than complain, just step up and actually be the sheriff that chases the outlaws and the bandits out of town.
Yeah, because you're right. It is, I would take this metaphor maybe too far, but like it is a privilege to be able to work at the very cutting edge of technology and build the internet of the future, right? So I do believe that's what blockchain is. I think it's a radical reshaping of the internet. And I think it's an extraordinary privilege to be one of the people who gets to shape that future. And so, yeah, you have to work extra hard. Yeah, you have to have higher standards. Yeah, you have to be more transparent than other people have to be, or get more regulatory scrutiny over time. Whatever that is, that's the price of doing business in this really cutting edge industry.
Over my shoulder right here is the pets.com sock puppet. And the two individuals that keep me honest, we've got Nelson Mandela and pets.com sock puppet. You've got the angel and the devil. And it is part of remembering what happens when exuberance and euphoria and arrogance and hubris and, quite frankly, lack of integrity ultimately ends up creating a space that is not safe. And I absolutely love the challenge of being able to say, do the right thing, even if it is the hardest thing, in order to create what I think is maybe a business opportunity, the likes of which we've never seen in our lives.
Yeah, and that's something that, my company, Icon, it's something we do every day because our whole mission has been making Web3 as easy to use as Web2, right? There's still a journey to get there, but we don't think any of the promise of the future can really be delivered if it's not easy for the average person to use. Like, there's no point in the blockchain if it's only being used by a very small fraction of people that really understand this stuff. Like, when the transformation happens, when the future arrives, is when most people can use it, when the average person can use it, in any country in the world, right? That's the whole design of the system, is that it's open for anyone to use. But right now there's this huge knowledge barrier, which is not fair, and it's kind of taking away part of the promise of blockchain. So that's what, like, every day we're here trying to make this thing actually easy for the normal person to understand and use.
So let's unpack a couple of ideas in what you just said, which is number one is Web 2 and Web 3, Web 2 to Web 3, Web 2 versus Web 3. I've taken a position, you might have a different position, but my position is I push off against Web 2. I push off against Web 2 as the enemy, specifically because I don't believe Web 2 has been good for mankind, for humanity, I should say, in terms of the fact creators haven't been able to monetize, in terms of data centralization and misuse. But you may have a different point of view, and I would just love to hear how you position and how and how, now I'm going to say our icon. I was going to say Acon in a second, but Icon is rethinking and positioning 2 versus 3.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right that you can't hold Web 2 up as too much of a villain, right? And for those listening who aren't in the space, right, Web 2 is usually when people start talking about like the social internet, right? The more modern internet that's not, quite so blocky and square like it used to be. And I think the thing about Web 2 is there has been a lot of malfeasance. There has been a lot of kind of monopolists harvesting everyone's data and taking advantage of people. But there's also been just tremendous innovation, tremendous value delivered to the world, everything from streaming video to, new medical innovations, totally changed science, right? So I think the internet, which is Web 2, is the internet as people know it today, is so big that it encompasses almost all of the good and evil of humanity in one place. And so to say it's all good or all evil, that's for like Locke and Hobbes to debate endlessly in philosophy textbooks. For people who are really working every day, it's just the version of the internet we are working off right now, and we got to go from 2 to 3, and then we'll go from 3 to 4.
I was thinking, forget about them. How about the Blinder Jaffe philosopher powwow fireside chat, which I guess is what we're having right now. What about the other way to think about the normie versus degen, or just to position a different way, what we see happen and what we saw happen with Reddit or with Starbucks Odyssey? This idea, and I remember back in the day, which is you didn't even need to use the word weblog short for blog, or at least blog short for weblog. If somebody was reading the blog, did it need to have a big flashing sign that said, warning, you are reading a blog, or attention, you are now reading a weblog. You are now reading the thoughts of somebody living in their mother and father's basement. I mean, you didn't. At the end of the day, if the content was great, you read the content. And if Google told you that this was a relevant piece of content you should be reading above a New York Times or Wall Street Journal, then so be it. So would love to hear your thoughts on how you kind of, and especially how the company is going about simplifying and ultimately mainstreaming Web3 use and application, because we desperately need it.
Yeah, I do think we desperately need it. I mean, you alluded to this earlier with this, like actually rewarding creators for their content, or, there's so many different uses of Web3. I like to tell people who aren't in the space that it's like taking the power structure of the internet we have today and turning it inside out. Instead of big companies like Google and Facebook and Apple having everyone's data, the data is shared, everyone can have a copy, so it's trustworthy, and that empowers people everywhere to do amazing new things. So what we do is we try and make that, all those brilliant, innovative ideas, we try and make that really look familiar to the average person. Because I think so much of the internet does come down to like UX and design. And so that might mean, logging into an application on a blockchain with an email address or a Google ID or an Apple ID. It might mean, we're working later this year on logging in with your face on your phone, those types of things that are really familiar to people, so that the innovators that are using this new technology to improve the world and change the power structure of the internet. We're there to help kind of be the evangelists, if you will, that make it easy for the masses to get involved.
As my friend Mitch Joel would say, with, not instead of. It's the power of and. It's the power of collaboration. It's the best of Web 2 with the best of Web 3, creating that sweet spot or that harmony.
And like you were saying earlier about blogs, one of the things we're really trying to do is, even though you might come into the system logging in with Google, because that's what people are used to, we try and give you ways to kind of Trojan horse into what people in the industry call self-sovereign identity, which is an identity you own that Google doesn't own, right? And so we're giving you a blockchain wallet. We're giving you public keys and private keys. And so the whole idea, which again, we're in the first inning of this baseball game, but like the whole idea is that we make it familiar, and then you start to benefit more from Web3 over time as you get used to it, and then you can participate more fully.
How important is, and I'm going to share with you the quote of for the episode. I always choose a quote for my guest. This is what I found for you. It's a nice. It's one of the Web3 thought leaders and evangelists that you probably know very well, Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde said, most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions. Their lives a mimicry. Their passions a quotation. I think this also sets the scene for, you talk about, self-sovereign identity, but also this ability to, for a thought leader like myself, not to be ripped off, or a singer or a songwriter or a creator, or the fact that we are now lost in each other's identities, where our children are just trying to be like everyone else on Instagram or TikTok, etc. So I'd love for you to respond to OscarWilde.eth's quotation and just set up the power of identity. Because Mark, I got to tell you that I think that when we think about universal ID and the ability to own your data, and for marketers and advertisers, quite frankly, to earn the right to be able to talk to you and market to you and deliver things of use and utility, this is the tipping point for Web3, in my opinion, identity.
Yeah, I believe that too. I sure hope so, because I think one of the things we've seen on the internet, as you were kind of alluding to in the intro, is there's a real issue with real and fake, right? And so one of the things that Web3 does, and I'll spare people the cryptography details, but one of the things that Web3 does differently is your identity becomes a public key, the cryptographic public key that's paired with a private key that no one else has ever seen. You are the only one who's seen it, and you can mathematically prove when you sign a transaction that it's the real you signing it. So I think that is the future of identity on the internet. That's, of course, completely unfriendly to the average human being who doesn't know what probably half those words mean, right? So we're trying to put this friendly wrapper on it. But the genius of that, if we can achieve this, is that you have a shared record that truly tells who's who and who did what and who made what. And when you look at these deep fakes, ChatGPT, all these things, it's the only hope we have. The fakes are going to get so good, they'll be indistinguishable. They're already very close. And so I think the way you'll be able to know who really made something in the future is it'll be signed. It'll be cryptographically signed. And for it to be cryptographically signed, there has to be a record that we all share of who owns which public key. And so that's the only way anyone can ever truly trust that, oh, Marc Blinder is the guy who made this video, uploaded this video. And Web3 is perfect for that. Blockchain is perfect for that, because it's this shared record of trust, and trust is in scarce supply on the internet today.
Indeed it is. I actually jotted down, and it worked out beautifully. This is my for my sins being a consultant, that everything has to be in threes and in C's. But I said a shared record of collaboration, contribution, and compensation. And I think those are your 3 C's there. Ultimately, when we know who did what, we can figure out who gets what. And when we do that, we can also do something that, another thing that just jumped out at me, Mark, was you spoke about turning it inside out. But when it came to Web 1 leading into Web 2, it was this idea of leveling the playing fields. So we've always been trying to bring this idea, but what you're talking about is almost this inside out approach, kind of beginning this thing where what was inside is now outside, outside, inside. And it's just a more visual way of being able to conceive or perceive this rebalancing based on fairness, contribution, and justice, I think.
Yeah, completely. Because the tools are getting so powerful. The processor speed is so cheap. The bandwidth is so cheap compared to what it used to be. So all these things that used to kind of limit access are falling away, right? That's the thing about Moore's law, right? What is it? You get twice the processing power every 18 months. So if you think about AI 3 years from now being quadruple the power it is right now, it's mind-boggling, right? It's already mind-boggling. And so the idea that we need some way for people to have a shared space that they control kind of as equals, as participants, is really important. Because if you unleash the AI of 3 years from now that's 4 times as good at making Facebook addictive, and you put people in a metaverse made by Facebook that's super addictive, there's eventually going to be no way out, right? You have to have a system at some point where people have a voice in the rules of the system so that it can be built to protect humanity instead of just bulldoze it.
I think the good news is that Facebook or Meta has given up on the metaverse for now. So now that they've given up on it, do they have to change their name again? That,
They could change it to Altria.
Yeah, Altria. That's all right. You deserve what I call the rim shot, or I like it, Altria. Little bit of an inside joke as well. But yeah, there was a putting lipstick on a pig, I guess. But that's another story for another day. Let's talk about identity, and let's talk about what you're actually doing. And so you're doing something about it. I mean, you're not just it's not just thought leadership. You really are being able to to focus on identity through OR.network. Is that the right way to? So tell us about OR Network.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So, and just to be clear for everyone watching, so I'm the CEO of Icon. That's my day job. But Icon, the company, everything we build, we use the OR network, and we're deeply involved, and that's what we build all our products on top of, right? And the whole idea behind the OR network is it's a public registry of identity that anyone can use, anyone can write to. It's a public blockchain. So unlike other blockchains, which are Turing complete supercomputers that can do anything, like Ethereum is a supercomputer you can use. Turing complete is an old computer science term that just means you can do anything. You can code it to do anything. The OR network hardly does anything. It only does one thing really, which is store identity. So it can do it very fast, very cheap, very scalable, because it only does this one thing super well, and then it plugs into other layer 1 blockchains like Ethereum, like Avalanche, Polygon, EOS, Wax, Telos, Algorand. We plug into lots of different blockchains so that you can someday in the future, when people really understand this stuff, you can own an identity that controls a bunch of wallets on a bunch of different blockchains, and you, Joseph, have kind of the master identity that controls all those different wallets on all those different blockchains, and also public keys that aren't even on blockchain. So there's lots of use cases, but obviously we're focused on blockchain right now because the usability is so tough and really needs a lot of help.
What does this mean for brands, for marketers? Because it's a $1 trillion industry for the most part, and And there is this, I mean, even if we think about the model for content, I always use this example, a little bit of a refresher. We're both doing refreshers for people that might not be up to speed. But I remember when David Schwimmer, one of the 6 friends, negotiated a $1 million per episode fee for each one of the friends. So for every, otherwise they did go on strike. So now for every episode, every 23-minute episode of Friends, 7 minutes of commercials, the 6 friends were getting $6 million. There is not enough audience. There is not enough of a business model to support 6 friends earning $6 million right now for a primetime 30-minute television show. Enter reality television, where one person who throws their name or outlasts, outwits, outthinks, outsmarts gets $1 million on Survivor, and the rest go home with absolutely nothing but maybe 10,000 more Twitter or Instagram followers. So the business model is not there. So advertisers, what people don't realize is the reason why you watch and get so much content for free is because of advertising, which again leads to the Netflixes and the Hulus of the world, that now people are, even the CBSs with Paramount and Peacock, etc., are now charging you. So when you look at a rebalancing of what we pay and what we get, it is clear that advertising and advertisers and brands are going to have to figure out a business model, or truly everyone will be left behind. So that is your hopefully softball or layup to talk about how can big corporations embrace, live with, and utilize identity verified and validated by the blockchain.
Well, I think the answer is a couple things, right? So first and foremost, this is great for big companies that aren't named Google, Apple, or Facebook, right? Because the two choices on the future of the internet are either those 3 companies own everyone's identity and then you're paying rent forever, or you can let your customers own their own identity and you can integrate with that. And that means you're not paying taxes to those 3 companies forever for their data, for their access. And for the users, it's way better because they can reap some of that rewards of their own identity, their own data, right? So whatever it is they're bringing to the table in terms of their content, their identity, their data, they can reap some of those rewards. So I think for big companies, one, there's a huge financial upside that will be slow to realize, but will be like a glacier moving as it comes. And the other thing is, I think you'll have marketing that is more opt-in and is much more powerful because people actually want it. Or if they don't want it, they're getting rewarded in the right way that it's worth it for them. I think we started to see this a little bit with email marketing on the internet, where every website now kind of give you like, hey, we'll give you this big a discount in exchange for signing up for our email list. That's happening on Web 2 today, but on Web 3, like all of marketing is likely to work that way on Web 3, right? Like the Brave browser is an example of this, where people get paid every time they are shown an ad. The user gets paid a little bit of the ad fee, right? So because the user is bringing their eyeballs to the table, their data to the table, their identity to the table, they're reaping some of the rewards. And I think that makes advertisers actually better off in the long run, because you're not shoving something people hate down their throat. You're giving them something that they think is worth it to participate in whatever way that is. So I think it's going to be great for big companies, but first it's going to be painful as they have to learn a totally new way to think about their business and think about the future.
It is the new permission marketing, and that's a beautiful thread back to even Seth Godin and his book on permission marketing. Because when you buy an NFT, when you buy into a project, when you even buy into a token, a coin, you are giving your permission to have some kind of a relationship. And when you're done with it and when you sell it, you are opting out. You are releasing that permission. It also works both ways. When you buy an NFT, you get access to a Discord and certain channels. When you sell that NFT, you no longer have access. And I think that's an important nuance. But there's another thing that you also just intimated, which is that it's a win-win for both sides. This is not imbalance. What we are really doing here is a rebalancing of the power structure, and that is critical.
Yeah, and I think I was told recently. I don't fact check me on this, but it's someone I really trust said that 27% of the global economy is used by the finance industry to basically play the middleman on a bunch of financial transactions. And so what you're talking about with systems like blockchain that are, trusted, can do payments, can do asset management and storage and holding of value, there's this huge multi-trillion dollar improvement in efficiency that can be given back to companies and people with a lot left over. And so I think, like anything, the opportunity is huge. It could go really great. It could go really badly. It could go somewhere in the middle. I think it's up to the folks like you and me that are actually working in this industry to help push it the right direction. So we're giving real value to real people. So it doesn't, maybe the value they get is your content or your Discord group or your, unique communities or whatever. That's giving back. But on the blockchain, you got to give people something they want so that they actually pay for it and take advantage of it. And it's a big mind shift, but I think it's good for the world.
That 27% of the global economy being powered by the finance industry. Look, I'm a marketer, and I always joke sometimes it's a bit, self-deprecating, but I say, like, I don't know how to earn or save money. I only know how to spend it. As a marketer, so I can laugh at myself as well. But I always look at my friends in the finance industry, wealth management and private equity and hedge funds and look, we've seen the world change, but I remember back in the day, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, all of my friends getting these big, fat, disgusting 6 and 7 figure bonuses. And what did they do? What did they build? What did they create? Nothing. They just moved money around. They just did deals on spreadsheets where companies were acquired and dissolved and integrated and people lost their jobs. I just never understood it. I never understood how the value that they were supposedly creating was commensurate with the money that they were taking home. And so that's my immediate reaction to what you said. When we talk about this rebalancing, we don't have to do a lot to just create a slightly fairer world that will benefit so many more people.
Yeah, because a lot of what you're talking about with like financial engineering, right? The people on spreadsheets all day, a lot of that is about capturing value rather than creating value, right? So like engineering, technology, fundamental research, all that creates value, right? It makes people's lives better, whether math, science, whatever, English, art, all that stuff. You're creating something of value for other people. But the financial engineering is most of the time is about how you capture value that's already in a system, which means you're basically like a reverse Robin Hood, right? Where you're finding all these ways to like slice money out of the system and put it in the pockets of the very few. And so that kind of value capture versus value creation is, I think, a really fundamental issue that blockchain and cryptocurrency are trying to solve.
I suppose a reverse Robin Hood would be hooding Rob, and probably in that name comes exactly the problem, right? The Rob, which brings us back to the bandits. Look, it's a great conversation, and for me, what this comes down to, what I love about you being on today, Marc, in particular, is the fact that it's a Web3 conversation that is positioned at a very, very high level, philosophically, strategically, even ethically. This is the kind of conversation that we need to be able to move the industry forward. And according to, here we go. So according to Howard Sacco, according to Oxfam, 54% of the world wealth is captured by the richest 1%. So we know these statistics. Well, I mean, maybe we don't know these statistics. Thank you for sharing that, Hawa. But ultimately, my son just did a project the other day, Mark, on South Africa, which is where I'm from, and actually said that today South Africa is still and has one of the most unequal, or has the most egregious inequality. And I was kind of shocked because I certainly am aware of the emerging and the growing middle class. But what really has happened is the rich have got so much richer and the poor have got so much poorer. And yes, there might be an emerging growing middle class, but there are still too many people being left behind. And so this isn't, to me, about massive hemorrhaging the system. These can be about small moves that can make huge impact for so many.
Yeah, well, one of the things that really shocked me in the book Capital in the 21st Century, I know Piketty's like conclusions are quite controversial, but I think the data is quite strong. And one of the things he showed there in the French Revolution, where they beheaded all the nobles, talk about hemorrhaging, right? They're like beheading people and stealing their assets, did almost nothing for wealth inequality in France. And the thing that actually made a more equal society was just raising the marginal tax rate on the richest people. And so it's like, you're right that these like small changes, right? A small change in tax policy was better for creating a more equal society than beheading a bunch of nobles. And I think, probably people slept better at night too, without any guillotines hanging around.
Yeah, I think there can be no worse hemorrhage than when your head is cut off. You can take that to the bank. Let's wind down with something that I think brings us back to the warm and fuzzies of what we believe we are a part of. And that is a word that you mentioned that is so critical: wealth, building wealth versus and creating wealth versus this idea of what was the word used? Capturing. So
value
capturing
versus
wealth
creating,
versus creating. It really does speak to what it is to be a builder and how proud we need to be to say we are builders. We are building something. It's weird because web developers, even when we think back to Web 1 and Web 2, not necessarily, they might have been building, but they were never thought of as builders. Talk about why it's important and what it means to be a builder now in this Web3 space.
Yeah, well, I think, like so many things, the wealth of nations, right? It come from what was built by the generations before, right? All of our lifestyle, all of the luxuries we enjoy, all of that is built by the generations that came before us. And so I do think it is something that we should respect and something we should care about and something that we should be considerate of when we decide what we're going to do with our lives. When you wake up in the morning, am I creating value? Am I helping to build something for my country, my town, my city, my family, whatever it is? Am I building something for the future of humanity, or am I just kind of capturing value and sticking it in my pocket? And so, I wasn't expecting to get up on my soapbox about this, but I hope people do look at what they're doing with their lives through that lens sometimes and think about how much they owe the generations that came before and how they can give back to the generations that come next.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully articulated. Look, I don't even know what's going to happen on this show, but I do have the ability to feel good and not have to go and take a shower or a bath when I'm finished with the show, when I know that I feel clean and cleansed as opposed to dirty. And so I am hopeful, even with all the muck and the swampy creatures and the charlatans and the snake oil salespeople, that we're going to be okay because we have icons and icons having blinders, legends versus legendary people in the space. If you want to find out a little bit about what Marc is up to, please go ahead and check out well, first of all, follow him on the Twitter, mblinder. Check out his company, icon.com. I do want to share this because I love the way that you articulate. You said we are a product company 100% focused on building decentralized products that empower the great companies with decentralized ethos to scale and reach mass adoption. We'll get there. We will get to the next Super Bowl, but we will earn our way there. Marc, real pleasure meeting you and spending this time with you. I'm trying to always, I always forget because I run out of time, but I'm trying to just ask everyone because, I mean, you know, I'm looking at your face. You must be, I think, without giving away your age, in your 70s or maybe late 70s, early 80s. So I want to know what you know now that you didn't know then, back in your 20s and 30s. What have you learned that you can now share with your earlier and former and younger self?
Well, I mean, whew. One, the stuff we were talking about before, about really being thoughtful about what you're building and what you're doing with your day, is something that I've only come to truly appreciate later in life, in my 70s. And then the other thing I have to say is, I think when I first got into the startup space, I was just doing it because I needed a job. I was in San Francisco, and it was like the thing people did, back then. Now I think there's become quite this like cult of entrepreneurship around startups and stuff like that. And I would say to people that are younger that I think it is better to do something you believe in than to like be a founder. Like being a founder, it sucks. I've done it more than once. It sucks every time. And the only good part about it is getting to work on something you believe in with people you believe in. And I would say if you're someone in your 20s, you really might want to save yourself a lot of pain and heartbreak and suffering by just finding something you believe in and joining and being a part of something great. You don't necessarily have to be a founder. And that's something I would have happily told myself in my 20s if I could.
Well, you get to do both. You get to be a founder type, a builder type, a visionary type, and actually do something you love and make a difference. And I'll tell you that someone who might actually be rarely in their 70s or thereabouts, although he's probably eternally young, is Chuck Norris. And this is what Chuck had to say about you, Marc.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And we will see you very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.